Welcome to the Tech Lowdown Show, where each episode we'll be discussing opportunities in the tech space with entrepreneurs from the U.S. and around the world. I'm your host, Chris Jones. Any entrepreneur knows that raising funds to start and grow a business can be extremely difficult. Despite all the stories we read about businesses raising millions of dollars from VCs, a recent study that I read found that to be in the top 50% of startups who've raised capital, your startup will have to have raised about $1.75 million. And that's definitely a fair bit of money, but in the grand scheme of building a business, trying to deliver a 10x return for investors, it's really just a drop in the bucket. Today we're going to hear from an entrepreneur who went a different route to raise capital for his venture, accessing the public markets in Australia via a reverse takeover. Dave Whitaker is the co-founder and largest shareholder of Thread Limited, a publicly listed company on the Australian Stock Exchange, which has built a messaging app that brings all of your contacts together in a single place, making it easier for you to share stories, photos, and videos with the people important to you. Originally from Australia, Dave spent a decade in Hong Kong, starting and building tech businesses. Dave is an entrepreneur several times over and brought me in to co-found Thread with him almost 2.5 years ago. Dave, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show, my man. What's the lowdown?
Thanks, Jonesy. Great to be talking to you about Thread at last.
Awesome. So first, congratulations on the launch of Thread this week. It's an exciting time for the company.
Whew, yeah, tell me about it. You were there along with us. It's been an amazing journey. It's taken us across a couple of different continents, 3 actually, and we've been really fortunate just to have some great people with us, and just to get such a great result.
Great. So we're going to dive into the details around how a backdoor listing or a reverse takeover takes place. But first, I want the listeners to learn a bit about your background. What took you to Hong Kong and what brought you into the crazy world of entrepreneurship?
No problems. I think every entrepreneur out there knows, right from the time they start grade school that's probably what they are. It's a way of looking at the world. And so no matter what you do as a job or a profession or when you go to college, and so forth, you just always seem to be pushing yourself to try and do new things and to start things from a business context. My background originally was trained as a systems analyst, so I understand tech and architecture. And then I got into IT recruitment back in the late 90s, and that gave me a fantastic broad view of the IT industry. I just realized immediately how much I didn't know about IT. So that was fantastic. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Everybody thinks they know everything until they have that Mike Tyson moment. So that was great, and that was a career that I stayed with for a long time, and ultimately was managing and starting recruitment businesses all around the Australia and Asia region. And how I got to Hong Kong was that I was headhunted, believe it or not, by a company to go up there and run their IT business in 2005.
Awesome. Really interesting. I want to get into the backdoor listing because this is one of those areas that, frankly, a lot of people just don't know about or even understand. Most of us have heard the term, but let's start off with the basics. At least for me, I didn't know what it was. So what exactly is a reverse takeover?
Right. So there's several different levels, and some of it gets a little technical. So I'll just keep it. I'll start with the straight up version. Basically, when a company that is already listed on a stock exchange has decided to either change direction or they're winding down, then they put the company into a particular situation that allows them to go and seek another project. And they go out and look for what they call a vendor, and that vendor is usually a private company that has a project that would suit to go into that listed vehicle. So once they identify the right project and the right people to come in, then a transaction takes place. And because the listed company is looking for a project and the project is looking usually to raise capital, and it's much easier in some instances to raise capital into a company that's already on the stock exchange, because it gives investors liquidity, which means that they have shares that they can trade, and it can be easier to value. So you strike an arrangement between the company and the listed company, and the exchange takes place where the project goes into the listed vehicle, and they basically hand over shares. That is usually the controlling interest of their company, and that's the reverse part. So it's called a reverse takeover because even though the listed company is purchasing the project into themselves, they're doing it by giving control to that company.
That's a great way. That's an excellent explanation. And what does control mean in a publicly held company?
51%.
So by doing this backdoor listing, these tech companies come in, or any company comes in, they take over a publicly listed shell, and then they're able to go out and raise capital as this new public entity.
Yeah, just back to your earlier point, I mean, it's not always 51 or 60 or 70%. Sometimes it's less than that, because you can have effective control of a listed company with less than 51%. But if you want to get things done, you need to, or to make decisions, you need to have 51% of the shares voting your way. But yeah, it's a really interesting way to raise capital. It means that you can then go to the market and do roadshows. And Chris, you remember, we've done a lot of meet and greets, going around Australia and up to Hong Kong and other places, and just meeting some really interesting folks in the capital markets game, and telling them what we did.
Great. And what are the benefits for an entrepreneur of this particular process for raising capital and funding your business?
Well, first things first, listing a company is not that easy. It depends on the stock exchange that you go to and the listing rules. For example, to list a company on the Hong Kong exchange on the secondary board, so not the main board, but the secondary board, you have to have audited accounts showing 20 million Hong Kong dollar profit over 3 years. And for startups, I mean, most startups aren't in anywhere near profit territory, and if they are, it's certainly not anywhere near there. So going into an already listed company, that company has already complied with the listing regulations and rules, and also means that they have existing shareholders that meet the compliance regulations for whichever board they're on. So all of that is done. Also, it means that when you're going out and raising money in the capital markets, you're able to show people that if they invest at a particular price, then the shares can be traded and they have the same opportunities that the share market offers to everybody.
Wonderful. And then when you're going through this process of reverse takeover, who are the key parties that are involved in this process, and what are the important things for an entrepreneur to be aware of if they're going to go into this process?
Get your own lawyer first up. Absolutely start with your own lawyer and make sure that they've got experience doing this, particularly for the exchange that you're going to list in. Second of all, go out there and talk to some different brokers. Don't just speak to one person. Don't think that they are the only source of income or all the good oil. It's a competitive market. There's a lot of people out there. Try and find the people that are a good fit for your business, who understand it, who see the potential, and who are going to stick by you, because it's a longer road than you think. So no matter how long people tell you in the first instance, it's going to take you 3 months, it's going to take you 6 months, my friends, it will not. I assure you, it always takes longer, and it's bumpy. There's a lot of compliance. There's a lot of things that first time, second time, third time entrepreneurs may not have ever come across before. So if you're keen to learn, then this is a great thing to do, because there's a lot of learnings. And get good advice. Make sure you're surrounded by good people, and stick to your guns. If you've got a good project and you believe in it, then don't let people shake that belief because they're trying to get you for a better price. Stick to the things that you believe in, and you'll see it through.
Great, great. So I want to go a little bit inside baseball-ish, a little bit deeper in the understanding the process. So I know you mentioned the brokers, you mentioned the lawyers, you mentioned obviously filing some paperwork. What I know you've got to deal with a prospectus, you've got to deal with audits, you've got to deal with the securities investment commission of whatever market that you're in. Can you just talk a little bit about how that all comes together?
Yep. Well, comes together. That's a very optimistic view. It all arrives at the same time. Hopefully, look. It's a regulated market, so there's very strict guidelines that you have to follow, and those regulations are there for a very good reason. To understand how it works, really there's a lot of different moving parts. So you've got the existing company, you've got the board that controls the management of the company, you've got the shareholders that the board answer to. So that's just in that listed vehicle. Then you've got your legal counsel. Then you have your brokers, and the brokers exist on many levels. They can be small firms, they can be large global firms, and they are basically the people who make the investment decisions on behalf of their clients. So they're a very, very important piece to this whole backdoor listing experience, because they have to go out and help you sell your story out to the market. So once you've got all of those pieces in place and you've got your team, so you're managing all of this, you've got to pull together a prospectus that describes and fits the compliance rules for the listing. And that can take a lot of work because every single statement in a prospectus has to be checked and verified and fact-checked. So you've got to have a team of lawyers who would, and by the way, I'm making this sound super hard. This gets done every day by companies out there doing it all the time. So, don't let this scare you off. But this is just sort of making sure that everybody knows what goes on, right?
This is what we want.
So you've got to have every single statement in a prospectus, and the prospectus typically for a listing could be 120 pages, maybe more. You've got to have all of the audited financials done and there every quarter up until the listing time takes place. You have to have submitted notice of meeting for the shareholders so that the shareholders can come and vote on the transaction, and that's got to get through. And then you submit it all to the regulatory commission wherever you are. In Australia, it's ASIC, and it has to comply with the ASIC listing regulations, and it has to go to the ASX or the NSX, which is the secondary board, depending on which way you're going, and it has to be approved there. So that's the easy part. Getting all that done.
And tell us what's the road show like? You're meeting with potential investors. Who are these people? What's it like presenting to those folks?
Well, look, that's the fun part. Depending whether or not you, as an entrepreneur, like getting up and speaking to people. If again, like I said before, if you really believe in your product and you're keen and you've got that enthusiasm, as long as you can temper that with sufficient business understanding of how your idea is going to turn into a real business, then you get the opportunity to stand in front of a room full of people and tell them how you're going to change the world or how you're going to disrupt a particular area. So roadshows are usually held in boardrooms, although I've done roadshows, and you have too, in coffee shops, restaurants, around lunches. It can really vary. I've seen roadshows done in pubs. That was quite effective. At the end of the day, it's a gathering of people, people who are influential and able to make investment decisions either on behalf of themselves or on behalf of their clients. And so you get up and you have to have a deck that describes the business and describes what your roadshow is and what your vision is, and you've got to be able to communicate that. And I really suggest that you entrepreneurs out there, if you don't have co-founders, get them, because doing roadshows by yourself, I mean, I could not imagine doing what we did as a one-man band. It was grueling enough.
It was brutal, absolutely. So then, after the listing takes place, funds are raised. What are the requirements as a public company that are different from those as a private startup that an entrepreneur should be aware of?
Have you ever seen one of those shows, where they have somebody who's, I don't know, either for a bet or for, to raise money for charity, they put them in a glass box and they make them live in that glass box, 20 feet off the ground for a week?
Yes.
Right, that's public company life, because every single thing has to be disclosed the minute that it becomes known to you. So that's called continuous disclosure. You have to make announcements constantly. There are ongoing regulatory reporting requirements. And again, as I said, those regulations are there for very good reason, to protect shareholders and to make sure that everybody behaves themselves. And so it's quite different from being, say a typical bootstrap entrepreneur who then picks up private equity or VC funding, because it's almost impossible to maintain skunkworks style development. We need to be telling people what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the money's been spent on, and all the rest of it. Now, there are carve-out rules that give you exceptions, particularly if there are things that are patentable or that are considered to be trade secrets. So it's not that bad. But yeah, I mean, you're always public facing. You're always talking to shareholders, and you're constantly speaking to the broker community so that they can explain, so that they can do an analysis actually of your company and help to value your stock, because your product is no longer your product; it's also your stock.
That's a great description. So, first off, that was phenomenal, explaining the whole backdoor listing and RTO process. So I want to move now to the real lowdown segment of the show. When normally here we get into the nitty gritty behind the ins and outs and some of the more interesting details. But what I want to do is I want to give you a chance to talk about Thread. I want to hear your thoughts on Thread. So if you can start by just telling the audience, tell us about the product, tell us about the original vision, and what you like about the newly released version of Thread.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, how long have we got? Because this has just been such a fantastic journey from start to where we are now.
It really has.
The original concept, like a lot of innovative ideas, came about because of environmental reason in tech that it just developed organically. So in other words, with the rise of social media and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and all of the other ways of communicating, it just became very obvious that each of those very fine companies was trying very hard to silo themselves, or to create a walled garden to provide everything that everybody needed within their properties. But the reality is that that's not really how people are. It's not how we communicate. So what was becoming evident is that, I was speaking to my family on Skype. I'm doing WhatsApp. I've got contacts in Facebook. I've got business contacts in LinkedIn. And, then of course I've got my Microsoft Office 365. I've got a Google account. I mean, it's just like everybody. We're just all over the place. And this was becoming really unwieldy. And so we sat around and thought, well, there must be a way to actually, to share content in a more unified or a more logical fashion. So that was the genesis of Thread. It was actually about how we could share content more easily. And so we prototyped originally drawing together your LinkedIn, Facebook accounts, and a couple of others, and doing a button in a browser, so that if you're on a particular web page and you wanted to share that, then you would click on the sharing button. It would open up with your contacts from your different social accounts. You could choose who you're going to share it with and hit send. So that evolved, as you know, from a simple browser button to a full messaging app and then a messaging platform. And we realized as the journey continued and as our thinking evolved and as the whole space evolved, that it just made sense not only to aggregate contacts, but to aggregate content and news feeds. So we've got, more than 75 channels that we've launched with just in the channel section for written media. And every single thing that you connect, you can start a thread about. So the idea is that communication is constant, it's contextual, and you just want to be able to do things the way that we would do things if we were sitting around a coffee shop table talking. So, you and I talking about soccer, and that's all, because that's all you talk about. And then when you talk about soccer, you're talking about Arsenal because that's all you talk about. And then you say, hey, there's a Gunners match on. Do you want to go do it? You want to go see it? So, yeah, let's organise some tickets. And so that's a natural conversation. But if you put that in the context of a chat app, there's no way that you could order a coffee, order transport, buy a ticket, and have that conversation back and forth in one place. That would take 4 or 5 or 6 different apps and a phone call. So that was our thinking. Yeah, so that was our thinking. It was like, well, how do we communicate naturally as friends, as people? Let's get all of that information in one place. Let's bring some third-party services. So we deep link into Uber. We deep integrate into Ticketmaster as well. And there's a heap more of those that are coming down the pipe. And just make it easy for folks.
Makes a lot of sense. So obviously the next few months are important. I was checking the Play Store today, and so far it's at 4.6 stars in the Play Store. Amen. Where do you see the product going from here?
Wow. We've had a lot of organic growth really quickly. It's only day 2 of the actual launch. We've got some new release stuff coming out. We've got a very solid tech team behind us. So our delivery cadence is very quick. We're looking at weekly updates, and, adding additional features and functionality. But, look, it's the most important thing. Chris, you and I talk about this all the time. The most important thing is that we've got to be patient and open and listen to our users, because, we built, the platform because we thought it was a good idea. But how that platform evolves is now going to be a collaborative process between us and all of the good folks that are using it. So we've got a lot more stuff in the pipe that's coming. We're going to be bringing music. We're going to be bringing streaming video. There's a heap of other things that we'll bring to the platform. But yeah, it's really going to come down to, ultimately the users telling us how they use Thread and what they get the most out of.
Great. Makes a lot of sense. I've got 2 more questions for you, and then I will let you go because I know it's an extremely busy time for you. Thread was not a simple product to build, and the funds raised enabled you to create a much better infrastructure, leveraging our partners Lateral in order to do that than you would have been able to do had we been bootstrapping this. Tell us about that underlying infrastructure and architecture that we're building Thread on top of.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One of the questions we get asked a lot of is, can other people build Thread? And of course they can, absolutely. But it hasn't taken us 2 years for no reason. It's incredibly complex. There's we've got a large development team of really skilled people who come from all sorts of backgrounds. One chap ran, all of the systems for one of the police departments here. Someone else has come from London, from the financial tech industry. It's a really, really complex architecture because anything that you make look simple, as you know, has just got so much work and so many hours that have gone into it. Fortunately, as you said, we have been able to raise the money, and that's why I would encourage any entrepreneurs listening to this, get out there if you can, if you really believe in your idea, and go raise the money. If the idea is that good, the money will come eventually. This did not happen overnight. There's no such thing as overnight. And so the main thing is that we've been fortunate to raise the money and be able to build the platform out. So we haven't just built an app. We've built a full platform, and we'll be opening that up to developers to build widgets and other things against our platform, because we now provide what we're calling messaging as a service and multi-auth, where if you think about it, the thread identity, because you've already connected your other identity systems to it, a single thread identity is potentially more powerful and more accurate than any other one out there. So there's a lot of places that thread can go, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without Lateral and without the great team that we've got behind us.
Great. And last question for you. There have only been a handful of global consumer apps launched from Australia. What does Thread's launch mean for the Aussie tech scene?
I've always been a great believer in every local tech scene. And when I lived in Hong Kong, I was, really supportive of the startup scene there, which has just boomed in the last few years. And good friends of mine went to Singapore and they saw the same thing there. When I left Australia 11 years ago, it was quieter, and there wasn't the availability of capital that there is today. Hopefully, what the success of Thread will do, though, is it will champion the tech industry, and that's what every local tech scene needs. It needs standout systems or standout successes that raise the awareness in the investment community and just in the community in general, that there is a lot of innovation in your local scene, in the local tech scene. Because Australian innovation is incredible, considering the size of the population and where we are in the world and so on. The innovation that's come out of Australia is absolutely incredible, and it's very sad to see it go overseas because it's got to raise money there. So what I'm hoping is that Thread will stand out as an example, and that it will attract capital into the wider market.
Great. Dave, thanks for your time during this extremely busy period. Tell our listeners how they can find out more about you and more about Thread.
Well, you can go to LinkedIn, David Whitaker with 1 T, and you can find my profile there, or our website, which is thread, thred.im, M for mother.
Wonderful. I'll have links to Thread in the show notes, folks. And as always, if you like the show, please download all the episodes and leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. You can find show notes at techlowdownshow.com. And of course, follow me on Twitter at cjones2002.